guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Lauren. I feel like my hair is like beehiving, and also it's supposed to be messy cute, but I think it might just be messy, but anyway. Hi, welcome back to the channel. It's Lauren. Thank you so much for watching. Today we're going to be talking all about the Retro Glam palette from Natasha Denona. We have waited 2 years for this palette. You know, it's been 2 years since the mini retro was first released. This little palette is so beautiful. One of my absolute favorites from Natasha Denona. And out of the minis, probably, yeah, like in my top two, I like this and I like the Zendo. I just think it's such a beautiful color story. It's unique and almost looks like a little challenging, but I feel like actually works. And so when we got wind initially that there was going to be a retro big like midi palette instead of a mini, I was so excited. But what we got was ding 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 this. Okay, we initially got this last year, which is very different than this palette of the same name but different size. You know, it was a little disappointing. Now with hindsight, I will say, now that I have this, finally did it and bought this palette, but I will say this color story is beautiful on its own. Like, although, you know, retro initially threw me off with this, if I take that away and just look at this color story, I do think it's so pretty. But we got some sneaks, we got some leaks, you know, I didn't know what was going on for a little bit when this was actually going to be released, but we finally got the actual like retro palette. This is actually called the Retro Glam though, so it's kind of like if retro and glam had a baby, I believe. And I do feel like it overall delivers in terms of the feeling of this color story expanded into a big palette, which is so exciting. And seeing pictures of this, I was just like, yes, it's happening. It's finally happening, you know? There's something about these kind of greens that are very unique, these sagey, like blue toned greens. Not exactly what's in here actually, which is something I'm realizing, like having it in my hands and actually using this palette. But I do find this really pretty and exciting and different. And it really was exciting to finally get a palette that you felt like what it should be, kind of. I don't know. I was really excited for this. So we're gonna get into a lot of stuff. I'm gonna get into swatches. I want to get into some comparisons, just holding it up against other palettes. You can see what it looks like, specifically the retro, the mini retro, and the glam palette, since that's kind of what it's about. I also do a look with this, and I might pop some footage in of a look I did before if it's not too horrible of like lighting and stuff. I didn't do the actual look on camera, but I just filmed what it looked like. I don't know if it'll show it in a good light, honestly. I have a few thoughts, and then I am going to make some tweaks to this because you know I had to. So yeah, get to where you want to go. There should be timestamps down below, but first let's get into some swatches of these colors. Looking at the outside of this palette, it is so pretty. I really love it. It is a little more detailed than the other ones. Has like a raised lip with like an actual design that is 3D and textural to the palette, which is really pretty. And then here is a close-up of the color story. This is a little bit different lighting, so hopefully you can get a different idea of what these colors look like. Starting off, the first shade in here is called Flare. This is like a raspberry pink color. It has like an orange base almost on it, and I find it has like a silver sparkle on top of that. And it is a metallic type shimmer, but more sparkly. Not the most sparkly, but more sparkly. Next, we have the shade Jazzy, which is a cool toned charcoaly gray. There's something a little bit, I want to say purple, but then I want to go green. And so I don't know which one to classify it as, but I feel like a charcoaled taupe or gray is probably the best way. Maybe it has a little bit of brown to it. Then there is the shade Oscar, which looks like it's going to be taupe, but this has like this swampy green to this beige. Like it's like a beigey taupe with a green undertone, and there is something just kind of swampy, and on my eyes, I feel like a little sallow about it. Then we have the shade Evergreen, which is a cream to powder formula, and this looks like it's going to be pretty dark, especially compared to the rest of the palette, but I just find it doesn't actually go as deep as you expect. It's really pretty. It reminds me of like a spruce tree, or I think it's a spruce, where they kind of look frosted. There's something about this that feels velvety and kind of muted, like it's not all the way saturated, even though it is. Like that is the full extent that it will go, but it almost seems like it's not quite all the way saturated. And then last for the first row is the shade Marlin, and this is a metallic frosty green, again like sagey blue green on this. A lot of the greens that are in here all have this kind of blue sagey undertone to them. This one also, the shine on it kind of shines silvery, and so it kind of looks lighter in certain lights. Moving on to the second row, we have the shade Maxi. Texturally, this is kind of a in between of a satin and metallic to me, and it is very similar to Jazzy. Jazzy is slightly deeper, but this is like a dark gray taupe with a little bit of like a hint of purple, I would say, which again is just very similar, I think, to Jazzy. Then we have the shade Sage, and this is exactly what it says. It's a sage green. It is matte. There's a lot of blue to this green, and it's very smooth. Again, it looks like it's almost like frosted or fuzzy, even though there's no shimmer. It's just the way that this color looks. It's almost like a pastel. Then we have the shade Holly, which is a peachy pink, but it has like something muted about it. It's almost like a muted peachy Pepto-Bismol kind of matte color. Then we have the shade Fringe, which is more mint and more green than Sage, but it still has blue to it and it's lighter. It's a matte color. All the greens in here just have a very similar tone to them. Like they're all in the same family for sure. And then last in the second row is the shade Faye, and this looks like it's going to be neutral, but it does have a green undertone to it. It's kind of, again, swampy. This reminds me the most of from the original Natasha Denona palette. It's like a lighter version of the shade 60s, the matte green in that palette. It's more like olive, leaning a little more yellow to it. Moving on to the last row, the first shade Flutter is so pretty. This is a silvery champagne with tons of sparkle to it. It doesn't have a super opaque base, and this is definitely the most shimmery shade in the palette. Then there is the color Lucy, which is another kind of beigey looking color, but this has a definite green and swampiness to it as well. If you actually put this next to a brown that doesn't have that, you would tell immediately. Next we have the shade Palladian, which is a mint shimmery green. It is very icy, this color. The green doesn't pop out a ton. Like it looks more green in the pan than I feel like it actually expresses itself when you're using it, and that is like a metallic. Then we have the shade Belle, which is a terracotta. There's a little bit of like mauve to this though. It's not as like peachy. It has like more purple in it than you expect, and that's a matte color. And then last, Oz, one of my favorite colors actually. This one to me is like a bit of a satin metallic, and I really like this one because it has something like sexy about it. It's not quite a duochrome, but I find, you know, in different lights, it looks a little darker in the base, like a little black, and then it looks green. It's kind of understated and grungy. There's not a lot of sparkle going on, but I really like that one. So there's the palette in its entirety. You can definitely see the overabundance of like greens in here. That's definitely the dominant color, with a few pops of the pinky shades and then a few neutral colors kind of throughout. Overall with the color story, I really like it when I look at pictures, but I feel like in practice and even just looking at it here, I do find there are some repeat shades, or maybe not repeat shades, but just similar colors. Like these two are quite similar to each other. I feel like even these two, not exact, but kind of similar. And when I think of how they would be in a look together, they're really building on each other in a similar way. Even like these three are like versions of the same color, so you're just getting a very monochromatic look across the board in ways that I guess I didn't expect. I expected a little more range, I guess. Anyway, let's get on to some comparisons. I'm just going to show up both of the palettes so you can kind of see. I know it's kind of crude, but I just want to be able to show you what these look like. So here is the retro Glam with the original mini retro. You can see definitely the inspiration here, and you can see how the dominant color she went with is that green for sure, even though these are more blue than this is. This is more like a true olive. Hopefully you guys can still hear me, but here it is compared to the retro palette. Obviously the retro that came out has absolutely no greens or anything. It's more of a maroon mauve-y type of color story, which we're not seeing much of in this new one. And then last here, this is it against the Glam. This new retro palette is the retro Glam, so it was taking some inspiration, I believe, from this palette. And you do see some of those taupey kind of gray charcoaly shades in here. The jazzy shade as well as the similar shade to it, I would say, are the closest, and maybe even that Flutter color, which is just like a champagne, like an icy champagne. But yeah, I think that's mostly it for the comparisons. I mean, I have a lot of the other palettes, but I don't feel like any of them quite come close to this color story. Even Metropolis has a few greens, but it went more golden and bronze. This is definitely way cooler of a take. Even the greens in here have so much blue to them that I find it to be quite cool tone. But let's get into me creating this eye look and you can see how I made it. All right, let's get into the look. I don't know exactly what I want to do. I've done a green look already, but I'm really wanting to use this green and do something a little smoky, so I might do another green look. In reality, there's only like 3 pinky / peachy shades in here anyway, so I do feel like it's mostly like taupes and greens. I'm just priming my lids and I'm using the Sigma Eye Base in Sorbet. I think first I'm going to go into this shade here. It's a matte. It's called Faye, and I'm just going to be running that in my outer corner and kind of in my crease. There are some pretty interesting like neutrals in here that lean very green, but still neutral overall. But it's once you put them next to another neutral that you really notice how green they lean. Oh my gosh, I do not want to rhyme, but look at me go. Isn't that weird how that feels like embarrassing somehow? To rhyme something you didn't intend to. I don't know why that is. This shade I haven't used yet. I do feel like, I don't know if it's me, because sometimes I go on with stuff a little too light. Like I should put more on and then blend out, but I like to like add slowly and then blend up and build up. But some shadows just don't do that well, and I feel like that's kind of what's happening here. I'm going to change to more of a pinched fluffy brush and see how that goes. If I kind of lay it down and then wiggle it out. Yeah, that's a lot better. I think it's just, you have to put more on than less, or in some areas it won't blend nicely. All right, so that's that color down. I think it looks pretty good. I'm gonna go in now with Lucy, which is lighter and similarly looks very neutral, but is quite actually green. I used this the other day thinking it would be more taupe, but I was like, definitely a little swampiness to it. All right, for the lid, I'm just gonna go in with my finger because that's what I normally do. And I'm gonna take the shade Oz, which is so pretty. It has like a darker base to it, and it's not as metallic as the other kind of sagey green that's in here. It's a little bit deeper. I don't know, I think more sultry, honestly. And I'm just gonna push that onto my lid, blending with my finger as I go out. It has this like almost slight duochrome, but like so subtle. I don't even know if it's actually a duochrome, but it has just something about it that it looks different in different lighting. And I think last, we'll see. I'm gonna go in with the darkest green here. I believe this is one of those cream to powder formulas, and I'm taking it on a domed dense brush just so I have the most control. And I'm just gonna add that to the outer corner. It's weird because I expect this to give more depth than it does, but it really doesn't add that much more depth. And I don't know if it builds up. And I've noticed, you know, I've seen a couple other reviews and I feel like that's what they've been saying too. But I think this is gonna go on darker. And usually with Natasha Denona's stuff, it goes on darker. I feel like all the other colors I've used have kind of gone on darker, but the actual dark shades, I feel like I want a little more pizzazz. It's not quite there, but I think that looks good. I kind of like where it's at. So I'm gonna take this shade here for my brow bone. It's a really pretty sparkly shade. It's called Flutter. This might have been a bit much, but I guess that's kind of me. I genuinely don't know if I like how that looks, but it's okay. I'm glad I tried it nonetheless. I'm gonna take the shade Palladium. It's this light mint green. That's gonna be my inner corner today. I guess I'll add a little more of this. I don't know. I just feel like it needs something and I don't know what that is. At some point, I'm just gonna try that Oz color on its own and see how I like it without anything else, but it looks good for now. I'm gonna take that Jones Road Beauty Ivy eyeliner. It's like a very similar color to Oz, but in a liner form. I'm gonna bring a little bit of that on my lower lash line, and I'm probably gonna tight line just a little as well. I feel like sometimes when I'm working with greens, I have to be careful. The pink in my like waterline can really like just stand out, I think, because pink is close to red, and red is opposite of green, and so it just kind of like highlights that, and I don't love that. I've been noticing that lately. I am gonna top over that liner with that same Oz color just to do it. Okay, I'm gonna add some mascara and we'll see how it looks. So the mascara makes me like it more, so that's good, but I don't know what it is. Even when I did my look yesterday, like I liked it okay, but I wasn't just obsessed with it, and I don't know if it's just the green and like getting used to this specific color of green because it is a little sagey or what it is, but it's just not connecting off the bat immediately for me in the way I guess that I thought that it would. So here's the look. A very sparkly brow bone we got going on. I also am trying out a different brow product, so if it's a little off, that's why. But yeah, it's okay. Like, I think everything blended at the end fine, you know? But again, it's not really as deep as I expected it to go when I used that green, you know? It stayed kind of powdery looking, and like something about the blue didn't let it get to its deep form, which is weird because when I use this palette, I always feel like this olive, although it looks so green here, tends to look kind of gray and come off gray brown, you know? It doesn't pull as green. So maybe I'm just expecting more something like this. I don't know. Anyway, that's the look. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the palette. From the few times I've used it, I definitely don't, this is still like first impressions, even though I've used it twice, is how I look at it. So I don't have full thoughts on this yet. First, I do like the updated packaging. I like that it's a little bit more pizzazz than the normal packaging. And with the price increase and stuff like that, I do think that it's like higher quality feeling, but we still get the awesomeness of this packaging being able to be undone, the singles to be able to be popped out, which we will be doing in a second. But I just wanted to note the packaging, although it could be small to other people, I do appreciate that factor. As for the inside, I really do love this color story, and it is so much more similar to the actual Natasha Denona mini retro that came out. Like, this is what I expected the initial retro palette to look like, at least more so. I mean, you can see how these are very close. I think something that was a little bit surprising though for me is that I feel like the range of this palette is still the same as the range in this palette with 5 shadows in terms of depth and kind of what you can do. There's a lot of green in here, which I do find very unique in some ways to Natasha Denona's line and the shadows that she already has. And so I do like that, but it doesn't go super deep. There's some like pastels in here, and although I find the mini retro muted, I don't necessarily find it pastel. It's not pastels in here, but this one went a little bit more on the pastel side to me. And in some ways I was getting reminded of the actual pastel palette that came out earlier this year. Mine is moved around, so it's not exact, but some of those like minty greens that we see here, I mean, these are more muted compared to those, but I don't know, it's just giving me like similar vibes to the pinks and greens and blues that were in the pastel palette earlier this year. And that's not really the vibe here. There's something neutral and muted and different, but not, again, pastel. So that was a little different than I expected. I was also surprised there weren't as many pinks, but I'm assuming that's because of the actual retro palette that came out before this, which I initially was disappointed in this, but now that I finally have this palette, I love the retro palette. I think it's an amazing color story, not as a break off of the mini retro, but just as its own color story. It's really pretty, but we're definitely not getting that many of the maroons in here. She left it to the actual retro palette, and I really feel like calling it the retro glam was appropriate because there are quite a few of those kind of cool tones in here, like 3 or so. But then the rest are these sagey greens, and the sagey greens that are in here are all kind of the same, just different values, maybe is what I'm trying to say, or tints or hues. I should get more acquainted to exactly what I'm trying to say here, but it's like the same green in a different finish and slightly different. Like these two, yes, they're different, but also so similar. And so I feel like there's just a few looks, and the range, like I said, is just like, I don't know, I feel like the range I can get from this, I can do a green look, I can do a pink look, I could do something neutral, I can kind of mix it up and do all of them in this 5-pan. And for some reason, I just feel like for a 15-pan eyeshadow palette, I should get like so much more, and I just don't think that's what's happening with the lack of really deep shades, which she's like known to do. I don't know, I don't hate it, I just think it's a little bit different actually in my hands. And I also think that how I'm using the sagey greens and how I'm getting used to those on my eyes is also a little different, and I don't know if that's just gonna take a little time to get used to and get accustomed to that on my eyes or what. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, but you guys know me, right? So although I might be saying that, I do think each of these colors individually in this palette are really pretty, and you know what I'm about to say. Natasha Denona's shadows do pop out of the palettes, and that's why I really love her brand and why I really love her eyeshadow palettes. Even if the color story as it is isn't something that's 100% perfect for me, 100% something that I love off the bat, I know that if there's some good gems in here, if it has some good bones, you know, then with the other palettes that I've invested in, I can create custom shadows. And these I almost see as singles that I'm buying in palette form and then can do whatever I want with later if I want to. So that's what I want to actually get down to doing today. I'm gonna just tweak this a little bit. And I'm not saying this is how she should have done it. I'm just saying there's a few tweaks I want to make this a little bit more wearable and to get a little bit more versatility out of it, so I'm not only creating sagey green looks only. Like, I really love the pinks that are in here and I'd love to explore that more. I'd love to have a deeper shade in here so I can just have green on the lid, but not green in the outer corner that's not really giving me the depth and contrast I want. So that's what I'm gonna do, and I hope you guys will enjoy seeing that. I don't know how different it'll be. I haven't done it yet. I'm about to do it with you. So that's what we're gonna do next. And I just have to say I love this customization aspect, this personalization aspect. If you're getting bored with these palettes, you can do this. If a color story as is doesn't work for you, you can do this. And I just love that, you know, I love that it's both. It's singles and a palette. It's kind of like a car that can drive in water. Like, that's how it feels to me. So let's get to tweaking this palette. All right, so here's the palette. We're really close up and in different lighting, and we're not overhead like I normally do. I can't do that setup right now, but hopefully this will give you just like a different view of the palette, if anything, is what I was hoping. I might actually even do swatches in this lighting just to see how it is, so you'll have to let me know if you like it. I'm gonna pop all of these out and then get to picking what shadows I think I want and adding other shadows in. All right, so the palette is completely empty and we have the color story laying out here, and I've already taken the time to label these, so I just use a label maker and I do that just so I know it's the Retro Glam and this goes in space 1. That's just how I do my system. But now to go through and try to pick some others, I definitely want to add some more of these kind of colors. I feel like I love this psychedelic shade, so I might take that out. I also really love either something like this or something like that, or even this really deep maroon shade, just to like bring some depth or more depth when it comes to the kind of maroons that are in here. I also even love this color, so I'm gonna put that in too. So that's what I decided to pick from the actual retro palette. I'm gonna next go into the Glam palette and see what I want. I think I want this middle shade because it has it's like a charcoaly color and I feel like it's gonna add some depth. And to be honest, I don't think I'm gonna pull anything else. I don't think so. But I definitely still wanna look at the other palettes I have. This is what my Metropolis palette looks like currently, which is kind of like a version of the palette that we have with a lot more variation of the greens and the pinks that are in here. Just more saturated. It's not as retro. I feel like something with the retro palette, I do like how it is muted, you know? But I'm definitely gonna pull some of these out. All right, so here's all the colors I pulled, and I know I want to get rid of probably one of these shades. I also need like a black. I don't know why this doesn't feel like it's gonna get... Maybe it will. Maybe that will build up to what I want. I think I want to keep this color. I really like this one from the palette. These two I just find so similar. I know they're not the same, but they just feel so similar, you know? And I think I'm gonna go with the lighter one to keep in the palette and get rid of the darker one, and I'll keep that up there. This I find kind of unique, so I'll keep that. I love this sagey green. I do like that green as well, so maybe I'll keep that one. I really like this blue. This is from the Zendo, actually. And I feel like everything goes so sagey in here, and this is just dark and like a blackened blue, but I feel like it works. I don't know. I kind of want to put that in and see. I do like that green. I think I can get rid of this peachy pink. Like, it's just so light. I don't think I need it. And I don't really like this going too pastel. Same with this green I'm going to get out. I might keep that in, but I'm going to remove that one. That gives me 3 more shadows to play with. So I want to put in something darker, matte-wise. That still doesn't even look that dark, though. I want to put this in, kind of. I like that. I kind of don't like that one. I kind of like the idea of this better. I might get rid of that. Okay, I think I like this, so I'm gonna put it in and see. It might be weird. I don't know. All right, so that's my palette. I like switched up the order and everything, so you see like the rosy tones. I probably should have like made this the middle row and had these switched around a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, even this, there's still like a lot of beige going on, but I just feel like, oh, that's so green. That's not very retro, is it? I don't know. I love the black though, just to add. I really want to make something deep and grungy a little bit with this color story, and still have the ability to do something kind of 60s and retro, you know? So I'm probably gonna play around with this version of the palette and see how I like it. I know it doesn't make sense for her to necessarily do this color story because I'm using shadows she already has, you know? So it's like she already has them, why would she do them again? So again, I'm not saying this is how it should have been, but I definitely am excited that I can kind of tweak the color story to work best for me and the situations I want it for and all of that. And I think this is at least a version I want to give a try. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to leave it here, and I'd love to know what you're thinking of the palette. Have you been enjoying it? Did you pick it up? Like, what are your thoughts? Let me know down below. But other than that, I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.